She didn't raise her voice when the other woman used her husband's black card. She simply waited for the machine to tell the truth. Vanessa Blake lifted Richard Whitmore's black card between two manicured fingers, holding it just high enough for the Chanel associate to notice the name stamped across the front. The boutique on Fifth Avenue was quiet in that expensive way only luxury stores could be quiet, with soft carpet under polished heels, pale gold light on glass shelves, and handbags displayed like museum pieces behind spotless counters. Outside, New York traffic moved in gray winter waves, but inside, everything smelled like leather, perfume, and money people wanted others to see. Vanessa loved that kind of silence. It made every small sound belong to her. The click of her heels, the snap of her compact mirror, the faint rustle of a shopping bag as an associate laid another box beside the register. She wore a cream wool coat that looked new enough to still remember the hanger, oversized sunglasses pushed into her honey blonde hair, and a smile sharpened by the belief that being chosen by a wealthy man was the same thing as being powerful. Add the black classic flap, she said, barely looking at the price tag, and the tweed jacket in a size 2. Richard said I should get whatever I want. The associate smiled professionally, the kind of smile trained to stay smooth no matter what it hurt. Vanessa leaned closer to the counter, then raised her voice just enough for the woman browsing scarves near the mirror to hear. His wife never knew how to enjoy this life. Some women are handed everything and still look miserable. The woman by the scarves did not turn around. Not yet. She stood with one gloved hand resting lightly on a folded silk square, her cream trench coat falling cleanly over her shoulders, her dark blonde hair tucked into a low knot at the nape of her neck. Evelyn Whitmore had entered the store 3 minutes earlier without announcement, without drama, without the nervous hunger that followed women who came somewhere to prove a point. She had come in quietly, the way snow begins before anyone notices the sidewalk turning white. Vanessa saw her, first in the mirror. For a second, the smile on her face widened, delighted by the audience she had been given. Evelyn did not flinch. She did not walk away. She did not ask why Vanessa had Richard's card. She simply looked at the black rectangle lying on the marble counter, then at the pile of boxes beside it, and something calm settled over her face. Vanessa mistook that calm for defeat. She turned back to the associate and touched one more handbag with a pale fingernail. This one too, she said. Actually, make it 2. One for me, and one because his wife is standing right there pretending not to care. The air changed, almost too subtly for anyone to name. A shopper stopped turning the pages of a catalog. The associate's smile tightened at the edges. Somewhere behind the counter, tissue paper whispered as if even it had become uncomfortable. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. No rush. No trembling fingers. Just the slow glow of the screen lighting the inside of her palm. Vanessa watched her, amused. Calling Richard? She asked. You should. He's the one who gave it to me. Evelyn's eyes lifted from the screen. They were not angry. That was what made Vanessa hesitate for the first time. Angry women were easy to understand. Angry women could be laughed at, dismissed, filmed, blamed. But Evelyn looked like a woman reading the final page of a contract everyone else had signed without understanding. No, Evelyn said softly. I'm not calling Richard. Then she tapped one message, locked the phone, and placed it back in her pocket. Vanessa let out a small laugh, bright and brittle. Good. Then let's not make this awkward. She slid the black card toward the associate with the confidence of someone placing a crown on her own head. Put it all on this. The associate took the card, glanced once at the name, and moved it toward the reader. Evelyn watched the gesture with the stillness of a woman who had already survived the worst part of the humiliation and had no intention of interrupting the lesson. The machine blinked awake. Vanessa adjusted her sunglasses on top of her head and angled her body so Evelyn could see the total on the screen. $87,000 and change. It was not a purchase anymore. It was a performance. Vanessa smiled. The card went in. For 1 second, nothing happened. For 2 seconds, the store seemed to hold its breath. And then the machine made one small, clean sound that cut through the boutique like a silver blade. The sound did not belong in a place like Chanel. It was too small to be dramatic, too clean to be ignored. A single electronic note that made Vanessa Blake blink as if the machine had misunderstood who she was. The associate looked down at the screen, then back at the card, keeping her expression polished but no longer warm. Vanessa leaned closer. "Run it again," she said, still smiling. But now the smile had edges of panic pressed beneath the gloss. Evelyn Whitmore did not move from beside the scarf display. The soft gold light touched her cheek, her gloves, the simple wedding ring she had worn for 14 years, and for a moment the boutique seemed to fold around her silence. It was the same silence Richard had once mistaken for weakness. Years earlier, before the Fifth Avenue addresses and charity galas and newspaper photographs, Evelyn had stood beside him in a 900-square-foot apartment in Queens, wearing one of his old sweatshirts while she balanced numbers on a scratched kitchen table. Richard had dreams bigger than his credit score and confidence louder than his bank account. Evelyn had been the one who read the loan papers twice. Evelyn had been the one who sold the small sapphire pendant her mother left her when the first investor walked away. Evelyn had been the one who stayed up until 2 a.m. with cold coffee, marking contract clauses Richard called boring but later repeated in boardrooms like they were his own discoveries. When Whitmore Holdings finally began to rise, Richard learned how to thank donors, bankers, politicians, and men with golf memberships. He never learned how to thank the woman who remembered every overdue bill from the beginning. At the first gala where his name appeared on the wall in silver letters, he introduced Evelyn with a hand at her back and a voice too casual to be cruel on purpose. "My wife prefers to stay out of the business side," he said, while Evelyn smiled beside him, knowing she had rewritten half the proposal that brought them there. People believed him because Evelyn did not correct him. That was her mistake, or maybe her mercy. She let him have the applause because she thought love was not supposed to keep receipts. But love, she learned, could become a room where one person kept building the floor while the other invited strangers to dance on it. Richard's compliments became shorter. His absences became longer. His phone began to turn face down at dinner. Then came Vanessa, all bright laughter and practiced admiration, asking Richard questions he enjoyed answering and pretending not to notice the woman whose name was still on the deed, the accounts, and the foundation papers. Evelyn never confronted Vanessa at restaurants or charity events. She never followed Richard. She simply watched the pattern become clear. A dinner in Soho charged to the household account. A hotel lounge downtown. A boutique purchase disguised as a client gift. One by one, the little humiliations arrived wearing expensive perfume. By the time Vanessa lifted that black card in Chanel, Evelyn was not surprised. She was only finished. At the counter, Vanessa tapped one fingernail against the marble. "There must be some mistake," she said, louder now, because volume was the last shelter of people losing control. The associate nodded carefully and inserted the card again. The machine thought for 2 seconds. Evelyn looked at Vanessa, not with hatred, not with triumph, but with the strange peace of a woman who had already packed her heart and left. Then the screen flashed the same word again. The second decline message did not make Vanessa quiet. It made her crueler. Her cheeks warmed beneath the boutique lights, and because embarrassment needed somewhere to go, she aimed it at Evelyn. "You planned this," Vanessa said, turning from the counter with Richard Whitmore's black card pinched between her fingers. "That is what lonely wives do, right? They hide behind bank rules because they cannot keep a man interested." The associate lowered her eyes. A woman near the fragrance display slowly set down a bottle she had been holding. Even the soft music overhead seemed to thin out, leaving more room for Vanessa's words to hang in the air. Evelyn remained beside the silk scarves, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The insult reached her, but it did not enter her. That was the difference Vanessa could not understand. For years, Evelyn had let Richard's careless comments pass through dinners and galas like cold drafts beneath a door. "You worry too much. You dress too simply. You would not understand this deal. You used to be more fun." Each sentence had taken something small from the room until Evelyn realized she had been living in a house where her own name sounded like an inconvenience. Vanessa stepped closer, carrying the unpaid Chanel bag as if it were already hers. "Richard told me everything," she said. "He said you were always tired, always serious, always making him feel guilty for wanting more." Evelyn looked at the bag first, then at the card, then at Vanessa's face. "Did he also tell you who signed the guarantee on his first office lease?" she asked softly. Vanessa blinked, thrown by the calmness of the question. Evelyn took one slow step away from the scarves. Her heels made almost no sound on the carpet. Did he tell you who sat with the bank when his second project missed payroll by 6 days? Did he tell you who put her inheritance into Whitmore Holdings when no one else would take his calls? Vanessa's smile tightened again, but this time there was less certainty behind it. That does not matter now. It mattered when the lights were almost turned off, Evelyn said. It mattered when his company had $12 left in one operating account and $200,000 due by Friday. It mattered when he needed a wife who could read contracts, not just applaud speeches. The words were not loud. That made them worse. They landed neatly, without smoke, without drama, each one polished by years of silence. Vanessa glanced around and noticed, maybe for the first time, that people were listening. Not staring openly, not yet, but listening in the careful way Americans listen when wealth begins to crack in public. She lifted her chin. He chose me. Evelyn's face softened, not with pity exactly, but with recognition. No, she said. He borrowed from you what he could not face in himself. Youth. Applause. The feeling that consequences are for other people. Vanessa swallowed. The card in her hand no longer looked like a crown. It looked like a question. Still, pride pushed her forward. Then why are you here? She asked. To beg? To warn me? To prove you still matter? Evelyn glanced toward the card reader, where the word declined had faded from the screen, but not from the room. Then she looked back at Vanessa. A card can open a door, she said, but it cannot buy a place in someone's life. Vanessa gave a short laugh, though it came out thinner than before. That sounds beautiful. But Richard gave me the card. Evelyn's hand moved to the pocket of her coat, resting lightly over the phone inside. Yes, she said. Richard gave you access. A quiet pause stretched between them. The associate held the black card without knowing whether to return it or try again. Evelyn's eyes did not leave Vanessa's. But Richard was never the one who controlled the account. Vanessa stared at Evelyn as if the words had arrived in a language she refused to learn. Richard was never the one who controlled the account. The sentence stayed in the air, quiet and devastating, while the associate kept both hands near the card reader, trained manners holding her in place. For the first time since entering the boutique, Vanessa did not know where to put her smile. She looked down at the black card, at Richard Whitmore's name pressed into the surface, then back at Evelyn's still face. That is impossible, she said. Evelyn did not answer right away. Her silence opened a door to the morning before, when the city was still blue with early winter and the glass towers of Midtown reflected a pale, colorless sun. Evelyn had sat alone in the back of her town car outside the Chanel boutique, not hiding, not shaking, not rehearsing angry lines. A paper cup of coffee cooled untouched in the holder beside her. Her phone rested in her lap, the screen bright with the name Jonathan Hale. He had been the Whitmore family attorney for 11 years, though Richard had always treated him like a servant who existed to clean up paperwork after the real men made decisions. Evelyn knew better. Jonathan remembered details. He noticed signatures. He understood the quiet architecture of wealth, where the person making speeches was not always the person holding the foundation in place. Mrs. Whitmore, Jonathan said through the speaker, his voice careful but steady. I have reviewed the trust documents again. Your authority is clear. Richard has spending privileges, not control. Any secondary user attached through his profile can be restricted immediately. Evelyn watched a delivery truck stop near the curb. Across the street, a woman in a navy coat hurried through the cold with a child's red backpack over one shoulder. Life continued with its ordinary little urgencies while Evelyn ended the most expensive mistake of her own. Do it, she said. Set the luxury retail limit to $1. Jonathan was silent for half a breath. Not because he disapproved, but because he understood exactly what that meant. That will cause any transaction above $1 to decline. Evelyn looked through the windshield at the Chanel doors. The brass handles gleamed like something waiting to be touched by people who believed access was the same as ownership. Good. There are 2 additional matters, Jonathan continued. If you want the financial separation to begin today, I can file the preliminary notice by 3 o'clock. I can also suspend Richard's discretionary access to the family trust until the court reviews the marital accounts. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. 14 years could fit into a pause if a woman had carried them long enough. The first apartment in Queens. The kitchen table covered in invoices. Richard's hand over hers when he promised that every sacrifice would be their sacrifice, every victory their victory. Then later, the empty chair at dinner, the hotel receipts, the private smiles at public events. Vanessa wearing jewelry Evelyn had seen first on a credit statement. Send the notice, Evelyn said, and suspend the access. Jonathan lowered his voice. Do you want this handled quietly? Evelyn opened her eyes. A group of shoppers walked into Chanel, laughing beneath the soft chime of the door. Somewhere inside, Vanessa was already turning humiliation into entertainment, already mistaking borrowed credit for a permanent throne. Evelyn's reflection appeared faintly in the car window. Calm eyes, neat hair, wedding ring still on her hand, not as surrender, but as evidence. Quietly was how I survived, she said. Today, quietly is how I ended. Now, inside the boutique, Vanessa's fingers tightened around the black card. Richard told me this was his, she said. Evelyn's gaze did not move. Richard tells many stories where he is the owner, she answered. That does not make them true. The associate glanced at the screen again. Vanessa's confidence was draining in small, visible increments, first from her voice, then from her shoulders, then from the hand that had held the card like proof of victory. Evelyn took one step closer to the counter, not to threaten, not to plead, only to stand near the truth when it finally arrived. Her phone vibrated once inside her coat pocket. She did not need to check it. She already knew the message. The notice had been sent. The trust access had been suspended. The card had done exactly what she asked it to do. The third attempt made the truth impossible to decorate. The associate inserted the black card one more time because Vanessa asked with a voice that sounded too sharp for the room, and because luxury service had a way of giving people one last chance to protect their pride. The little machine blinked. Vanessa held her breath without meaning to. The associate kept her eyes on the screen. Evelyn stood beside the counter with her hands folded in front of her, looking at nothing except the moment she had stopped paying for. Then came the sound again, soft and final. Declined. No one spoke. Not Vanessa. Not the associate. Not the woman by the fragrance display who had been pretending not to listen for the last 5 minutes. $87,000 in handbags, tweed, shoes, and perfume sat on the counter wrapped in tissue and ribbon, suddenly transformed from proof of power into evidence of a lie. Vanessa's face changed slowly, as if humiliation had to travel through every polished layer before it reached the surface. She tried to laugh. It came out small. There is a banking issue, she said. Richard will fix it. Evelyn looked at the card reader, then at the neat stack of Chanel boxes. Richard has always been good at promising to fix what he did not understand. The associate cleared her throat softly. Ma'am, I am sorry, but the transaction cannot be approved. Vanessa turned to her. Do you know who he is? The associate's professional smile returned, thinner than before. I know what the screen says. That sentence settled over the boutique with more force than any raised voice could have carried. Vanessa looked around and realized the room had become a mirror. Every face reflected back the same question she had been avoiding. What did she really have if the card did not work? She still wore her expensive coat. She still had perfect hair, bright lipstick, and Richard's name on a piece of plastic in her hand. But without approval, without access, without the quiet permission of the woman standing 10 feet away, all of it looked borrowed. Evelyn remembered a different counter years earlier. Not marble, not Chanel, just a bank desk in Queens with a chipped corner and a loan officer who did not believe in Richard yet. Richard had talked too fast that day. His knee had bounced under the table. He had drawn bright futures in the air with both hands. Evelyn had been the one who placed her documents in a straight line, one by one. Savings, inheritance, property note, personal guarantee. The loan officer had looked at her before signing. Not Richard. Her. That was the first time she understood that real power rarely announced itself. It sat quietly in paperwork. It waited in signatures. It lived in names people forgot to say out loud. Back in Chanel, Vanessa pushed the card toward the associate again, but the associate did not take it. Please call your bank, she said gently. The gentleness made it worse. Vanessa's eyes moved to Evelyn. You wanted everyone to see this. Evelyn's answer came without hurry. No, you did. A pale flush rose along Vanessa's neck. She opened her mouth, then closed it, because there was no elegant way to explain why she had chosen a public counter for a private betrayal. The card lay between them now, black and useless, its shine catching the boutique lights like a prop after the curtain had fallen. Evelyn took out her phone. One new message glowed on the screen. Jonathan Hale, preliminary notice filed. Discretionary access suspended. She read it once, locked the phone, and slipped it back into her coat. Vanessa saw the calm motion and seemed to understand that the decline was not a glitch. It was a boundary. At that exact moment, somewhere miles away in a glass office above Park Avenue, Richard Whitmore's own phone began to ring. Richard Whitmore was on the 42nd floor of his Park Avenue office when the first call came through. He let it ring twice because men like him like to appear unavailable, even to emergencies. His conference table was covered with renderings for a new luxury tower near the East River, all glass balconies and impossible promises, and 3 investors sat across from him waiting for the kind of confidence Richard had spent years perfecting. Then his assistant opened the door without knocking. "Mr. Whitmore," she said carefully, "the bank is asking for you. They said it is urgent." Richard's smile did not fall. It tightened. He excused himself with a joke about financial institutions loving drama, stepped into the hallway, and answered the call beneath the framed magazine cover where his own face looked younger, sharper, richer than he felt. By the time the bank representative finished speaking, Richard's hand had gone still around the phone. Suspended discretionary access. Secondary luxury spending restriction. Preliminary legal notice. Words he understood separately became a sentence he did not want to hear. "That is my account," he said too loudly. The representative paused with practiced politeness. "Mr. Whitmore, the primary trustee authority belongs to Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore." Behind the glass wall, one investor looked up. Richard turned away, but there was nowhere private enough for a man discovering that his public power had always depended on his wife's quiet signature. 10 minutes later, he was in the back of a black SUV moving south through Manhattan traffic, calling Evelyn again and again. She did not answer. He called Vanessa. She answered on the first ring, whispering hard from inside Chanel. "Richard," the card declined. Everyone saw. "She is here." For the first time, Vanessa did not sound glamorous. She sounded expensive and frightened. Richard told the driver to go faster, though Fifth Avenue was packed with taxis, delivery bikes, and winter shoppers crossing against the light. Every red signal felt personal. Every minute gave Evelyn more room to become someone he could not interrupt. When Richard finally entered Chanel, the warm air of the boutique met him with perfume, leather, and silence. He saw the boxes first. Then Vanessa beside them, pale beneath her makeup, clutching his black card like a receipt for humiliation. Then he saw Evelyn. She stood near the counter in her cream trench coat, calm enough to make the entire room look disordered. Richard walked toward her with the old authority in his stride, but it did not fit him the way it used to. His tie was slightly crooked. His breathing was uneven. His face carried the strain of a man who had been told no by a system he thought was built to say yes. "What did you do?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him as if he had arrived late to a meeting she had already concluded. "I stopped authorizing what should never have been charged to me." Richard glanced around, aware of the associate, the shoppers, Vanessa's trembling silence. "You are embarrassing me in public." Evelyn's expression did not change. "Your face," she asked softly, "or your lie?" The question moved through the boutique with the precision of a closing elevator door. Richard's jaw tightened. "Open the card, Evelyn." It was not a request. It was the shape of every command he had given her over 14 years, dressed in a lower voice because other people were listening. Vanessa looked at him, waiting for rescue, waiting for proof that the man she had chosen still held the room. But Richard was not looking at Vanessa. He was looking only at Evelyn. Because somewhere between the bank call and the ride across Manhattan, he had remembered the documents he never read, the accounts he never questioned, the trust he called old family paperwork, the signatures he had let her handle because details bored him when they were not applause. Evelyn took one step closer to the counter. The black card lay on the marble now, no longer in Vanessa's hand. "You gave her my silence and called it freedom," Evelyn said. "You gave her access and called it love. But access is not ownership, Richard." His phone vibrated again. He looked down. A message from Jonathan Hale filled the screen. Notice of financial separation delivered. Trust access suspended pending review. Richard's face changed before he could hide it. Vanessa saw it. So did Evelyn. So did the room. The powerful man had arrived to fix everything. only to discover he was the next transaction being declined. The message on Richard's phone seemed to empty the air around him. Notice of financial separation delivered. Trust access suspended pending review. For a man who had built his entire image on motion, deals closing, elevators rising, cameras flashing, the stillness that followed was almost unbearable. He stared at the screen, then at Evelyn, and the boutique watched him understand what Vanessa had only begun to fear. The black card had not failed because of a bank error. It had failed because the woman he had treated like background furniture was the only person in the room with the legal right to say no. Before Richard could form another command, the glass door opened behind him with a soft chime. Jonathan Hale stepped inside, carrying a slim cream envelope beneath one arm. He wore a charcoal overcoat, silver hair neatly combed, and the careful expression of a man who had spent years delivering bad news without ever raising his voice. The associate recognized authority before she recognized his name. Vanessa did too, though she did not know why. Richard turned sharply. "Jonathan, not here." Jonathan stopped beside Evelyn, not beside Richard. That small choice did more damage than any speech. He inclined his head to her first. "Mrs. Whitmore." Evelyn gave a single nod. "Mr. Hale." Richard's mouth tightened. Vanessa looked between them, waiting for someone to explain why the family attorney had walked into Chanel as if this were a boardroom and Evelyn were the chair. Jonathan opened the envelope and removed several folded pages, the paper thick and official, the kind that made wealthy men suddenly remember the signatures they had ignored. "As of 3 o'clock this afternoon," Jonathan said, his voice calm enough to reach every corner of the counter without sounding performative, "formal notice of financial separation has been delivered to Mr. Whitmore's office. Pending review, discretionary access to the Whitmore Family Trust has been suspended." Richard took one step forward. "That trust carries my name." Jonathan looked at him, polite and unmoved. "It carries your marital name, yes. It is controlled by the trustee. Mrs. Whitmore remains the controlling trustee." The words landed softly, which made them feel heavier. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked down at the card lying on the marble, then at the boxes she had ordered, then at Evelyn's quiet hands. The story she had told herself began to come apart piece by piece. She had not been chosen by a powerful man. She had been handed temporary access by a man living inside a system his wife had built, protected, and finally closed. Richard tried to laugh, but the sound had no shape. "Evelyn, this is unnecessary." She looked at him then, fully, with the same eyes that had once watched him practice investor pitches in a tiny apartment while the radiator clanked through January nights. "So was humiliating me at dinners," she said. "So was letting her charge hotel lounges and jewelry to accounts I reconciled. So was calling my patience weakness because it made your lies easier to carry." Richard's face shifted, not into remorse yet, but into calculation. He glanced at the associate, the shoppers, Vanessa, Jonathan, and finally the card. Every exit from the moment seemed to close at once. Vanessa stepped back from the counter, her coat brushing the edge of a display table. "Richard," she whispered, but he did not turn toward her. That was when she understood the second humiliation. When the money stopped moving, so did his devotion. Jonathan placed the documents on the counter in front of Evelyn. "Not Richard. Not Vanessa. Evelyn. The court will receive copies by end of business today," he said. Evelyn rested one gloved hand on the envelope. No flourish. No victory smile. Just a woman touching the boundary she had finally allowed herself to draw. The associate, still holding professional composure by a thread, looked at the unpaid merchandise. "Mrs. Whitmore," she asked gently, "how would you like us to proceed with the purchase?" Evelyn looked at the towering stack of boxes, the ribbons, the tissue paper, the beautiful things Vanessa had mistaken for proof of belonging. Then she looked at the black card. "Cancel it," she said. The associate nodded. One by one, the boxes began to move away from the counter, and with each soft slide of cardboard against marble, Vanessa's borrowed life grew quieter. Evelyn did not look at Vanessa when the boxes were taken away. She looked at the empty space they left behind, clean marble where $87,000 of borrowed confidence had been stacked only moments before. The associate moved carefully, almost tenderly, as if she were handling the remains of a performance no one wanted to admit they had watched. Tissue paper whispered. Ribbons slipped loose. The beautiful things returned to the shelves one by one, and each movement made the truth quieter, not kinder. Vanessa stood beside Richard with her arms close to her sides, suddenly smaller inside the coat she had worn like armor. Richard still had his phone in his hand. The message from Jonathan Hale had not disappeared, but his face had lost the ability to pretend it meant nothing. Evelyn turned toward the scarf display, the same place where she had stood before Vanessa noticed her in the mirror. For the first time that afternoon, she touched something for herself. Not the largest bag, not the rarest jacket, not the limited piece Vanessa had demanded because expensive things made insecurity feel less visible. Evelyn chose a simple ivory silk scarf folded beneath the glass, light as breath, with a pale gold border that caught the boutique lighting only when the fabric moved. The associate approached softly. "Would you like to see it, Mrs. Whitmore?" Evelyn nodded. The scarf was lifted from the case and placed across the counter, its surface smooth and weightless against the marble. Vanessa watched with a confused little frown, as if she could not understand why a woman who had just canceled an entire purchase would want only one quiet thing. Richard understood even less. "Evelyn," he said, lowering his voice, trying now for intimacy instead of command. "This has gone far enough. We can talk at home." Evelyn ran one gloved finger along the edge of the scarf. Home. The word should have held warmth. Instead, it brought back the dining room where Richard's chair stayed empty, the bedroom where his phone glowed face down, the closet where her dresses waited for invitations he stopped giving her. She did not look at him. "Home is not a place where someone teaches you to disappear," she said. Richard swallowed, the first sign of something close to fear crossing his expression. "I made mistakes." Evelyn picked up the scarf. "No, you made choices. Mistakes happen once. Choices build patterns." Vanessa shifted beside him, stung by how easily the sentence included her without naming her. Evelyn took her own card from a slim leather wallet. It was not black. It did not need to be. She handed it to the associate with the same calm she had carried since entering the store. "I will take this one." The associate processed the payment. The machine gave a clean, approving tone, gentle but unmistakable. Approved. No one celebrated. That was what made it elegant. One ivory scarf, paid for by the woman who owned her name, carried more weight than every unpaid box Vanessa had tried to claim. The associate wrapped it in tissue and placed it inside a small Chanel bag. Evelyn accepted it with a quiet thank you. Then she removed the scarf, not waiting to save it for later, and tied it around her neck with slow, practiced grace. The ivory silk settled against her cream coat like a flag no one else had permission to raise. Richard stared at her as if seeing the woman he had married and the woman he had underestimated finally standing in the same body. "You do not have to do this," he said. Evelyn looked at him then. Not angry, not pleading. "Finished. I paid for your beginning," she said. "I will not pay for your betrayal." Vanessa looked down. The black card remained on the counter between them, useless and exposed, while Evelyn's small white bag rested lightly in her hand. Outside, Fifth Avenue moved beneath a silver winter sky, taxis passing, shoppers walking, the city continuing without asking who had lost what inside the boutique. Evelyn turned toward the door. Jonathan stepped aside for her. The associate lowered her head in respectful silence. Richard said her name once more, but this time it did not sound like ownership. It sounded like a man trying to hold a door after the person inside had already left. Evelyn reached the glass door before Richard found the courage to move. His reflection followed her across the polished floor, tall, expensive, and suddenly powerless beneath the soft gold lights. "Evelyn," he said again, lower this time, not as a command but as a plea he did not know how to make gracefully. She paused with one hand near the brass handle. Outside, Fifth Avenue shimmered under a thin fall of winter snow, the kind that turned traffic lights into blurred jewels and made the city look gentle for a few seconds at a time. Inside, everything remained perfectly arranged except the people. Vanessa stood near the counter with her arms folded across her coat, staring at the marble as if the card might explain itself if she looked long enough. The boxes were gone. The ribbons were gone. The fantasy was gone. Only the black card remained, lying flat beside the unsigned receipt, a small dark object that had once sounded like permission. Richard stepped closer, but Jonathan Hale shifted almost imperceptibly between them, not blocking him, only reminding him that some doors were no longer his to open. Evelyn turned back. Her ivory scarf rested against her neck, soft and bright. The only thing she had taken from the store, and the only thing in the room that had been fully paid for. "I loved you when you had nothing," she said, her voice steady enough to make the words feel older than anger. "That was never the mistake. The mistake was letting you believe that meant you could leave me with nothing." Richard looked down, and for the first time that afternoon, no quick answer came to save him. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward him, waiting for denial, defense, anything that would restore the version of him she had been promised. But Richard only stood there with his phone in his hand and the truth open on the screen. Evelyn removed her wedding ring slowly. There was no drama in the gesture. No shaking hand, no bitter smile. Just a small circle of gold leaving the place it had occupied for 14 years. She placed it on the counter beside the black card. Gold beside black. Promise beside access. One had been broken quietly for years. The other had failed loudly in one afternoon. "Keep the card," she said. "It belongs with the story you told." Vanessa did not reach for it. Richard did not either. The associate looked away with the respectful mercy strangers sometimes offer when they witness the exact moment a person cannot hide from themselves anymore. Evelyn opened the door. Cold air entered the boutique, clean and sharp, carrying the sound of tires on wet pavement and footsteps moving through the city. She stepped outside without looking back. For half a block, she heard nothing but the snow-softened traffic and the faint rustle of the Chanel bag in her hand. Then her phone vibrated. A message from Jonathan appeared on the screen. "Court filing confirmed. Protective order on trust assets approved for temporary review." Evelyn read it once, then slipped the phone away. She did not smile because someone had been humiliated. She smiled because the weight she had mistaken for loyalty was finally leaving her shoulders. Behind the glass, Richard remained under the lights with Vanessa, the card, and the ring, surrounded by every beautiful thing money could display and nothing money could repair. Evelyn walked north through the falling snow, ivory scarf bright against her coat, her reflection passing from one storefront window to the next like a woman returning to herself piece by piece. She had not won him back. She had not won the room. She had done something far more difficult. She had stopped paying for the life that betrayed her.